Welcome to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, where each week we tackle a handful of the biggest sales, marketing, and go-to-market challenges that we're hearing about from all over the global data center, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure ecosystem. I'm your host, Joshua Feinberg from the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, DCSMI, and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. We're thrilled to have you with us. Please let us know in the comments what you do and what your company does in the data center industry. We would love to know. And if you've been with us before, we're thrilled to have you back as well. Welcome back to our frequent flyers, regardless of what you do in the data center ecosystem. Perhaps you work for a data center operator, like a co-location, hyperscale, edge, modular, wholesale kind of data center provider, or perhaps your company does something related to data center technology or data center facilities, or perhaps something to do with construction or real estate or investment, the capital market side of the data center industry. Very, very exciting times in that space as well. Or maybe your company is involved with some aspect of outsourced sales and marketing in and around data centers, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure. But regardless of what your company does, you are in the right place if you're looking to level up on your impact, your team's impact, and your company's impact on growth within the global data center ecosystem. And this is for you regardless of what you do on the go-to-market team. Maybe you work in some facet of sales, like as an account executive, sales development or business development rep, or some facet of marketing, like event marketing, field marketing, social media content, demand generation, paid media, or product marketing. Or speaking of product, maybe you do something related to product management or innovation. And if your company has both a direct and an indirect sales playbook, you may have channel partner colleagues on your team, or that may be your responsibilities, or you're, depending on your business model, perhaps you're working with technology integrators or value-added resellers or managed service providers or technology agents, master agents, or something, a close equivalent that is relevant for your particular business model. Or maybe you are the executive sponsor. You're the leader whose job it is to go out into the marketplace and recruit the best and the brightest to give your team the best possible competitive advantage in this space. But regardless of what your company does and what you do, you are for sure in the right place if you're looking to generate more of the right leads, reach more of the right decision makers, dramatically improve your brand awareness in and around the global data center ecosystem. So what is on the agenda for this week? What are the topics we're going to talk about? We're first going to look at how to improve digital infrastructure sales. Then we'll turn our attention to how a data center power and signal connector company can plan a new product introduction. After that, we'll talk about how a data center sales and marketing team leadership reviews and redirects focus. Next, we'll take a real quick break for a message from our sponsor. And in the second half of this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, we'll talk all about how to create more data center content, how to generate leads for self-hosted data center events. And as we head down the home stretch, as we get ready to land the plane in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, we'll talk about how to audit and refresh a data center go-to-market GTM playbook. If you have an idea for a topic or a challenge or a question that you or your team are currently facing that you think would be great to address on an upcoming episode, be sure to leave that in the comments on whatever platform that you're watching on, and we'll add your topic to the consideration queue to address on an upcoming episode. So without any further delay, let's jump right into this week's first topic, which is: how do we improve digital infrastructure sales? How do we improve digital infrastructure sales? First up, we need to take stock of the idea that selling today in the data center industry is very, very different than it was as recently as 5 or 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was super common that if you did everything right and you were very client-centric and you had a reasonably good website and social media and a presence on LinkedIn, you could count on the fact that your prospects, your future clients would get about halfway through the sales cycle, about halfway through their journey, through their research and decision-making process. And they'd be like, okay, yeah, I've taken it as far as I can go with doing lots of Google searches and asking Siri lots of questions and watching some YouTube videos, attending some webinars, asking some friends for advice on LinkedIn. I took that as far as I can go. I'm now 57% of the way through my decision-making process. They may not think quite that specifically, but rest assured there's data that shows that they were thinking that specifically. Okay, now I'm ready to schedule a tour, talk to sales, request a demo, whatever was the appropriate bottom of the funnel, late sales cycle call to action for your firm at the time. And at that time, CEB, the Corporate Executive Board, that's now part of Gartner, did research with Sirius and Salesforce and found that about 57%, 56, 57% of a typical journey was over before vendor contact, sales contact. So if you did everything right, you were in there for the final 43, 44% of their research and decision-making process. And that wasn't too bad. At the time, you may have thought it was challenging, but wow, is that easy compared to where we are today. Fast forward 10 years of digital transformation, millions of baby boomers retiring, a lot more Gen Z and millennials in decision-making roles, tens of millions of people getting used to working from home at the start of the 2020s. And we are now in a world where 83% or more of the buyer's journey is now over before you get to meet a prospect, meaning that they're almost ready to buy before you even know they exist. More sales allergic than they've ever been. And if you prospect and sell to IT professionals or engineers or other highly skeptical sales allergic type of folks, this is for sure a really, really big issue. And yes, they have access to search engines and they have access to LinkedIn and podcasts and YouTube and review websites and webinars and all those channels that were email marketing, all those channels that were really big 10 years ago. But what's changed now? They have access to all of those tools in addition to generative AI chat apps. You know, the large language model engines that are causing this crazy period of growth in and around the data center industry. Well, guess what? You're now in competition for attention with ChatGPT and Copilot and Perplexity and Claude and Grok and Gemini. So much so that many of your sales allergic, sales adverse prospects and clients would rather spend a lot more time talking to ChatGPT and Copilot than they would want to spend talking with you or a member of your sales team. And that is an enormous, enormous problem. But it's also a really, really big challenge. And this is part of the reason why we see so many companies across the global data center ecosystem starting to dramatically change who they're hiring into sales roles, account executive, business development type of roles. In most cases, these companies are now deciding that they want to hire people in sales and marketing roles that are a lot like the prospects and clients that they're selling to. And by a lot like or similar, we don't just mean on demographics. We mean that they are literally peers of the prospects and clients that they're selling to. A perfect example. Someone worked in enterprise IT through most of their career. And the last 4 years, they worked for a big hospital system, working their way up to VP of IT or CIO. And in the course of doing that, they know health tech extraordinarily well. They've gone to all the conferences, they've spoken on all the panels, they've been on lots of podcasts. They're known in the industry. They have great context. They have great instincts about what it takes to run a multi-hospital enterprise that is on the forefront of digital transformation. Your company decides you want to go all in as a co-location or hyperscale provider and focus on health tech clients, health tech SaaS clients, and similar kinds of healthcare related clients. You recruit that individual and that person walks in on day one. It may take them a little bit of time to get up to speed on your sales playbook and on your sales strategy, but the reality is you're not hiring them for that. You're hiring them because they're an expert on healthcare technology. And most of the future of sales looks a lot more exactly like this, where you see engineers being hired to sell to engineers. You see fintech IT folks being hired when your company wants to go in on financial services. You see former managed service providers or people that work for MSPs being hired to help your company grow and enable a channel partner program. So the future of and the present of marketing and sales looks a lot more like being a teacher, a consultant, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor, perhaps even a thought leader when it comes to anything and everything that's directly and indirectly relevant to your core ideal client profile, to your prioritized buyer personas. Because in a world in which your prospects and clients really don't need you for answers anymore, we have to provide a next level kind of value that they're not getting from the self-service tools. And what that looks a lot like is educating and building trust early and often. Why is early so important? Because if we just sit on our hands and we keep doing things the way we've always been done, you're going to be locked out for at least the first 83% of the buyer's journey, completely invisible. It's like, imagine that you were taking a group of clients or employees or channel partners to a sports event. It could be a football game, it could be a soccer match, it could be a baseball game. It doesn't matter. You're getting a hospitality suite in a major arena, a major stadium, and you're looking to do some schmoozing, some whining and dining with 10, 20, 30 people. They all arrive at the stadium ahead of time, 30, 60 minutes before the game, and they're let in, and they're having a blast. You arrive, and they look at your name on the list, and they go, whoa, we're not comfortable having sales and marketing people in the stadium during most of the game, because you're going to mess things up. You're going to be super aggressive. You're going to be obnoxious. You're going to be super pushy. You're going to have an agenda that you're trying to close people. We buy into all those stereotypes. And because of that, it is our house policy per whatever professional sporting league or whatever we're signing on for that, we can't have you in there. You're going to totally ruin the vibe. That's a lot of what's happening in the self-driven buyer's journey. You are completely locked out of the stadium until the fourth quarter, till the seventh or eighth inning, if you like baseball analogies. And the only way you're going to get back in there is to get out of the stereotypical vendor box, to get out of being seen as an account executive or business developer or marketer, and instead be seen like a teacher and a consultant, a subject matter expert and a trusted advisor. And from a practical standpoint, for someone that wants to improve digital infrastructure sales, this means rethinking your entire playbook so that your sales team and everyone else that supports your sales team pivots from their traditional job titles, positioning, responsibilities, and focuses more on delivering amazing learning and development and professional development events for your most important buyer personas. How does this work in practice? Well, for a digital infrastructure provider that's, for example, targeting healthcare executives in a particular region, you go and you define your ideal client profile. And you say, okay, our ideal client profile geographically, this is the region. We know roughly what size our ideal clients need to be able to afford our minimums, to not so large that they outgrow us and want to do this in-house. So you have your range. Maybe it's 50 employees to 5,000 employees or something like that. And you have your industries. In this particular case, you're saying healthcare. So you have a really nice, tightly defined ideal client profile. From there, you go about building your target account list to support ABM, account-based marketing, or ABX, account-based experience. Maybe it's a couple dozen, could be a few hundred companies in that particular region that fit the bill for that tightly defined ideal client profile. That's at the account level. Now at the individual level, at the people level, at the contact level, we need to be really specific on who the 2, 3, maybe 4 different people are in that particular account that we need to educate and build trust, that we need to create awareness with and get to want to spend a significant amount of time with our client-facing team members well before that 83%, early and often. The right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context, so that your prioritized buyer personas see you and your client-facing team members as some of the smartest, most creative, most resourceful people on the planet when it comes to anything and everything having to do with their core job responsibilities, working for this kind of company in this kind of region, roughly this size. Now, how do we know what is top of mind? What is going on in their world? How do we be incredibly client-centric? Well, once we figure out what our primary buyer persona is and what our secondary buyer persona is, who's the most important economic decision maker, who's the second most important economic decision maker on the committee, then we need to do our homework. We need to interview them face-to-face, video chats, and surveys, study their LinkedIn profiles, look at the notes in your CRM. We need to know their 5 or 6 biggest goals that they're working on this year, individually, that their team is working on, that their organization is working on. And we need to know the 5 or 6 biggest struggles or challenges that are driving them nuts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with digital infrastructure. So we end up with 10 or 12 topics in their own words. In their own words is so incredibly important. Don't make assumptions, don't guess. We need to get their actual words, because that's the difference between our messaging, our content, our events resonating versus falling on deaf ears. So it's incredibly, incredibly important to get those 10 or 12 topics in their own words. And we need to do the exact same thing for our secondary buyer persona, our second most category of stakeholders that we need to educate and build trust. And maybe your company has a third and a fourth category. I caution that if you're a relatively small organization, this is relatively new, I would try to limit it to 2 or 3 segments, 2 or 3 personas the first time through. You can always expand beyond that. But I don't want you to spread yourself too thin. So you have 10 or 12 topics. And that lines up with 10 or 12 months of the year. So for the next 10 or 12 months, one topic at a time, starting with the most frequently heard goals, starting with the most frequently heard challenges, I want you to create a fantastic world-class educational event that covers that particular topic for that particular buyer persona. You say events, that sounds expensive. That sounds complicated. It doesn't need to be when you're this tightly focused. So let's say, for example, you're a digital infrastructure provider. Your core offering is co-location, private cloud, and connectivity. And you have a couple of different co-location facilities spread out about an hour apart from each other. So for each facility, we define that ideal client profile, we build a target account list, we figure out what the biggest goals and challenges are. And then once a month for the next 10 or 12 months, we host a monthly breakfast seminar series, a monthly lunch and learn series. If it's too far for them to attend in person, it becomes a monthly webinar series, or you could potentially do both. I would encourage you, regardless of whether you do your events in your classroom or in your conference room, or whether you host those on a webinar platform or live streaming platform, similar to how this podcast, how the show is being delivered. The key thing is we are educating and we're building trust, and we're hyper-focused on what's top of mind for these most important segments, these most important buyer personas. How do we know what's top of mind? Because we asked them. We asked 10, 15, 20 people, and we figured out the consensus. So we know what topics we're going to cover in each one of these events. By the way, when you said this is expensive and complicated, not really. If you have a conference room or classroom in one of your facilities that you have access to for free, that knocks out an enormous part of the cost. If you want to the key thing is with all of this is a mindset shift. So many people in the data center industry are brainwashed into believing that they need to go to expensive national and global conferences with thousands of people in the room in order to connect with the right people. And the thousands of people in the room can be really good if there's a really high match rate with their demographics and your ideal client profile. In other words, like 80 or 90% of the people attending line up really, really well with your ideal client profile. But if it's not, if it's the opposite, if it's like 10 or 20% of the people, then you're looking for a needle in a haystack. And not only are you looking for a needle in a haystack, but the people that tend to benefit the most from regularly participating in national and global conferences are the people that are up on stage, that are getting to organically educate and build trust, that have earned the ability to be on stage as opposed to purchased the ability to be on stage. In a typical major conference with 2,500 attendees, maybe roughly 75 speakers, so we're talking about 3% of the attendees get to educate and build trust. And usually the speakers bring along an average of like 2 people from their company. So when we add up you and your coworkers, your team members that are coming to support your speaking, your panel, your keynote, your breakout session, whatever it is, maybe roughly 10% of the people at a typical conference are either doing the educating and building trust or in a position to capitalize on that. Another roughly 10 or 20% of the people that are at the conference are there because they bought a booth. They're a sponsor, they're an exhibitor. And they're hoping to capture some of the goodwill that's created by the speakers that are doing the education and trust building. The other 70 or 80% of the people that are there, you're the product. You're the captive audience. If you're not there, what conference? Seriously, is there a conference if you're not there? Speaker gets up on stage to an empty room. It's just other speakers and exhibitors. Are they going to be happy? Exhibitor spends a small fortune to rent their booth and bring all their stuff in by the truckload and flies and travel expensed out. A bunch of people from their team to staff the booth and no one showing up at the cocktail party on the exhibit floor. No, there needs to be that captive audience. There needs to be attendees that are there. But when it comes to educating and building trust, it is literally like 3 to 10% of the people that are there are in a position. Even if it's a perfect demographic lineup, it's not putting you in the right kind of context. It's not properly positioning you for the most important thing that you need to be accomplishing with your prospects and your future clients, educating and building trust. When you invite a couple hundred people or a couple thousand people from companies that are on your target account list to your breakfast seminars, to your lunch and learns, to your evening versions of that, to your webinar versions, you know the cool part? You don't have a loss factor. Everyone that's invited are the right people to invite. You might get greedy after a while and say, oh, I only want the CXOs to attend. I only want the C-levels. I only want decision makers. It's great when you can get the decision makers to attend. But you know what's also pretty good? When you're playing the long game with this and you're doing 10 or 12 of these events a year, and you start to get 3, 4, 5 people from the same company that report to the VP of IT or the chief development officer or chief technology officer, whoever it is that you're trying to. And over time, as the people that work for that company have a fantastic experience, the next time around, they bring more of their coworkers with them, and they're thrilled to go back to their companies and brag about this amazing cybersecurity series or liquid cooling event that they went to, or whatever is top of mind, ESG event, or whatever is top of mind for what is going on in their world. You may think that everything changes when you get access to the decision maker. If you get access to a decision maker, but you have not built consensus among the decision maker's direct reports, you're going nowhere fast. Unless there's like incriminating pictures or nepotism or something like that. But most rational decision makers want to know that you've met with their colleagues, that you've met with their team, and you've built consensus already. Without that, everyone is so risk averse. Sales cycles are so much longer, so much more complicated now. Hidden decision makers, visible decision makers. If you skip that key step and you don't build consensus among the decision committee, among the key stakeholders that report to that individual, you're getting sent back. You're getting sent back to repeat. It's like the silly Adam Sandler movie, Billy Madison, where his father bribes the teachers and he can't take over the hotel chain because he knows that Billy didn't pass the classes the right way. So he sends them back and he starts in kindergarten. He's got to repeat K through 12 all over again to prove that he's ready to take over the hotel. So if you manage to call in a favor and get an intro to the CEO or CTO or whoever it is that's the decision maker, and you skip those steps, like 80 or 90% certainty, you're getting sent back. So the beautiful part of hosting your own educational events as part of digital infrastructure sales is we are building consensus in the formative stages of the journey. What do we mean by formative stages? If you think about kids, teens, adolescents that are growing up, those are the formative years where you get to shape their values, right? To make them a good human being, to impart your words of wisdom. It's the same thing with a buyer's journey. If you don't get to meet a prospect or client till they're almost ready to buy, if you're like, well, I only want to talk to people that are sales ready, let them come to me when they're in the last 5 or 10%. The problem with that approach is someone else Shape the criteria that they're using to evaluate your category. That someone else more than likely is a direct competitor, an indirect competitor, or a non-business model competitor. So it is incredibly important that we get in early and that we get in often. And we recognize that there could be as many as 25 to 30 touch points that are going to happen between complete stranger and purchase decision. And the better job we do with monopolizing the oxygen, the surface area throughout that full journey, the more likely it is that we're going to dramatically shape the criteria that they use to evaluate all of the different options that are in your category. This not only keeps you on the short list, but over time, as multiple people from the same company come to multiple events, the competitive options start to disappear from their short list. Why? Because they're getting so much value, they're learning so much from you, that there's no need for them to look elsewhere to get this core knowledge. So again, we're replacing a traditional sales process with your marketers, your sales, your product, your account managers, your channel partner folks, whoever is relevant to your client-facing go-to-market team. And you are instead providing world-class education experiences, essentially professional development and learning development, because while your buyer personas are self-serving, like the end of the world is near, they're getting all of these answers from all these self-service tools, including the ones that are creating crazy amounts of large language model data that's filling up the data centers. What they still need and what they still crave is learning on how to do their job better, learning the best practices that their peers are using to achieve their top 4, 5, 6 big goals for the year, overcome their 4, 5, 6 biggest challenges and hurdles that are driving them nuts, messing with their work-life balance, interrupting vacations, whole host of issues that make them challenges that are driving them nuts. So to the extent that you can be that learning and development, that professional development, you will have the opportunity to spend lots of quality time imparting your wisdom and your best practices with the right people in the right places at the right time in the right context. Now, one of the most common objections when we talk about early and often, it's like, well, our business development reps, our account executives, they don't have that much knowledge to be able to do that. That's okay. Over time, when this is a C-level initiative on your side and your CEO is banging the drum repeatedly about how we're tired of getting ghosted, we're tired of the condescension, we're tired of being talked down to, we're tired of being jerked around. We're better than that. We have some of the smartest people on the planet. It's time that we let the industry know about it. When that message starts coming through loud and clear, your company and you'll start to invest in professional development. It's highly likely that when you're really specific on your buyer personas and you recognize that like 80 or 90% of them all have the same credentials and training and certifications, you'll wake up one day and say like, yeah, you know, that's a pretty good idea. I should go get the entry-level certification that will make me more entrenched in their world so I can speak their exact language. And $400 for budget, $1,200 for budget, your local currency equivalent. Your company is bought into that professional development and upskilling and reskilling. That should be the least of your barriers. Finding the time, well, if you're commuting, if you do a lot of business travel, you spend time in the gym, stop using time as an excuse. You likely have dozens of hours a year where you can be listening to professional development to help you get next level on these topics. In the meantime, again, when this is a C-level sponsored initiative in your company, it doesn't have to be you that's delivering this training or providing this great content at the events. It can be company. It could be your CTO. It could be your product manager. It could be a solutions engineer. It could be someone that's working in customer success that used to come from this industry. It could be all of the above. And when you've exhausted your internal speakers, look to your contractors, look to your consultants, look to your channel partners, look to your vendors. Very, very high likelihood that among those 3 or 4 core groups, there is multiple people who know a particular topic that came up on the top 10 or 12 list that would be happy to come in and give a 30 or 45-minute talk once a year. So what's a typical format for this? Let's say you're hosting a lunch and learn. You set it for, say, 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. They arrive. There's some networking. You have some lunch out. And again, you don't need to go crazy on catering. That's the beauty of doing this, is these are relatively low cost to host. pizza, sandwiches, salads. For 20 people in the US, it's probably $500 to $1,000 at the absolute most to put out a nice spread, similar to like what you would do if you went out to like a normal lunch with coworkers or channel partners or clients. You don't need to go crazy on that. They're coming to learn. And after they have that time to chat with each other, chat with some of the people from your team and the speaker and have some lunch, and you do your 30 to 45-minute talk, the content needs to be so outrageously valuable to who they are and what's top of mind for them that you're highly confident that if you gave this exact same session at a national conference, you would have one of the highest rated sessions at the entire conference. You'd have a long line of people coming up afterwards to chat with you, to get your card, to talk about working with you. And you're certain you'd be invited back next year. World-class conference grade content. And then obviously you can keep it super interactive. It's likely a pretty small group. You open it up for Q&A, and for anyone that wants to see the demo, take the tour to learn more, give them the tour. You show them the demo, show them what would be most valuable to them. That's where it might get a little pitchy, but I would encourage you to keep your pitchy kind of content, your call to action, your offer to maybe 10 minutes of that 90-minute session. Most of the conference, make sure that you over deliver on what they came for, because you want to make sure when you invite them to part 2, when you invite them to part 3, and you say, gee, it takes a village. This is usually a team effort when it comes to this topic. So with that in mind, who else from your team would benefit from also attending? Yeah, you want to make sure that when part 2, part 3 comes along from these target accounts, that they bring more and more of their colleagues. You want to make sure when they go back to their boss, when they go back to their coworkers, that they're bragging about this amazingly helpful event that they went to, and they're sharing the slides, they're sharing the handouts with their coworkers. That is what gets you to dramatically improve the surface area in these target accounts. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you can do this in your classroom or conference room, fantastic. If your prospects and clients are too far away, if they live or work too far away, then you run this as a webinar, or you do both. And always, always, always record, because there's always a lot more people that should have been there. You're never going to get 100%. Well, you could get 100% attendance rate, but it's not likely that you'll sustain 100% attendance rate. So always, always have recordings and slides available for attendees to share with their coworkers, other stakeholders. And of course, that gives you great, great repurposing stuff for everything else that you're doing with content marketing and social media and email for the next several weeks and the next several months. So when it comes to improving digital infrastructure sales, stop trying to sell the way you have for the last 5, 10, 20 years. The world has changed. It's not just power density and liquid cooling and lack of grid availability. Sure, all of those are big, big factors in the data center industry. But just as important for anyone that works in sales, marketing, go-to-market, account manager, customer success, your buyers' behaviors have changed dramatically, and you're not going to have the same entitlement to get in as easy as it used to be. We have to provide a lot more value, and most of what it comes down to, if you're looking to provide that value to get out of the vendor box and stay out of the vendor box, is to educate and build trust early and often as a teacher, as a consultant, as a subject matter expert, as a trusted leader, maybe even ascending all the way to being seen as a thought leader. And events are a fantastic low-cost way to do this, because you don't need huge numbers of attendees for this to really, really work in a big-time way. You just need to make it a priority for this to happen. Over time, you're going to get better and you're going to get faster at doing this as well. But most of all, it is all about extreme client centricity. Understand what your prospects and clients need to achieve professionally, what's in their objectives and key results, what's in their job description, what could get them a promotion, what could get them a bonus if they get right, what could the opposite do if they don't get it right, and what is driving us nuts. And if you use that mindset to come up with your monthly series, great things will start to happen. Deliver a ton of value and be seen as a core part of your most important buyer personas, professional development and learning development. That's how to improve digital infrastructure sales and make your competitors irrelevant. Because when your prospects and clients are spending so much time learning from your subject matter experts, your competitors start to become invisible. And that's a pretty cool thing. So that's what I'd focus on if you want to improve your digital infrastructure sales. If you're getting good value so far from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure to help spread the word by hitting the like button on whatever platform that you're watching. And if you're listening to the replay on one of the audio platforms, please take a moment. We'd be super appreciative if you could rate and review us on that platform as well. So what is up next? So now we're moving into the facilities side of the data center ecosystem. Remember, there's data center operators, there's data center technology related companies, there's data center facilities related companies. That's where we're going next. There's data center construction, real estate, and investment companies, and there's outsourced sales and marketing companies. So how does a data center power and signal connector company plan a new product introduction? How does a data center power and signal connector company plan a new product introduction? That is a fantastic question. And the best way to plan that new product introduction is to build the bridge before you need it. Dig the well before you're thirsty. In other words, don't make this a last minute thing. Make sure that you're planning this several weeks, ideally several months out. So in terms of your marketing team, in terms of your product marketers, in terms of your product managers, what you want to be focusing on is as that product, as that service introduction moves from alpha to beta, and you start to collect feedback from early users, document that feedback. Get your case studies together, ideally in video, because it's so much easier to go from video to print and from long form print into short form print, because that's going to be a very, very big part of allowing your early adopters to help spread the enthusiasm and help spread the value to everyone else. But in terms of a new product introduction, typically most people are looking to do is build a crescendo to gradually increase the volume as you get closer and closer and closer to launch date. Some people might have a wait list of people that came by to learn about it, but weren't able to sign up for yet because it wasn't available. Some people may send out emails to their prospects and tease what's coming next and have a wait list where they can get priority notification and perhaps a special pricing or promotion on launch. And you'll likely do the same thing with various other segments like customers and channel partners and different segments within your CRM, within your email marketing database. But in terms of planning that new product introduction for Power and Signal, you will almost certainly get the most value from having an in-person product launch. The second best kind of product launch, if you're doing this live, would be being able to show video, either through live stream or webinar, where you have your founder, whether it's your chief engineering officer, or your chief product officer, or whoever it is, whoever is your subject matter experts on there, demonstrating what you're actually doing with this new data center product, data center power product, and data center signal connector product. And in addition to that, it would be super useful if, in addition to you explaining and kind of setting the stage for, okay, this is the big problem that we found that's out there in the industry, a huge, huge source of frustration that people have had with the existing offerings on the market and not being able to find something that achieves what they're looking to achieve. We set about to solve this problem by building this new platform to help you achieve this benefit and this benefit and this benefit. And as a result, some of our early adopters have been able to move the needle on better utilizing power within their facilities, better understanding signal connectivity within their facilities in a big time way. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to a few of them so you can hear exactly some of what they were going through before they tested our new product and after they started utilizing our product, and let your let these live case studies essentially do a lot of the selling for you. So that's what I'd be thinking about for a data center power and signal connector company, is properly segmenting, getting the messaging right. Obviously, as you're building this and you're thinking of product management, you're almost certainly thinking of product marketing and what your different personas potentially care about. What's the feature set that's most important to them? Think about whether you're doing a in-person launch event for the product introduction, whether you're doing a virtual event, how you're going to get the timing right to maximize availability. Sometimes people in this category, in this facilities related category, choose to do a new product introduction at a particular conference because they know they've done their homework, they've done their due diligence, and they found that like there's a minimum of 80, 90% match rate between that conference's demographics and who'd be a good fit for this new power and signal connector product that you're going to be launching. So perfect place to be would be to launch it at a show. And then you talk to the show organizers about how you can get even more visibility on your company at this particular launch. Obviously, you can run demonstrations pretty much continuously at your booth as long as you have a booth. In a perfect world, I'd encourage you to get some editorial visibility for your leadership as well. Obviously, it's very, very frowned on for you to hijack a keynote or a breakout session or panel or something like that to get overly pitchy. But in like 5 seconds of passing or 10 seconds of passing, as you're wrapping up kind of next steps, and of course, drop by our booth. We're launching our new product this week, and we have special demonstrations. We have all of our subject matter experts and some of our clients here that can talk about it. And there's even a special promotion going on for this. I don't think anyone's going to have a major problem with that 10, 20, 30-second version of that when you're there, or when you start going into a commercial like that from your keynote, from your breakout session, from your panel session. Yeah, that's when people start to get bent out of shape. So that can for sure. Some conference organizers too have some special like showcases and special visibility that they'll do with Blast and shining even more attention on your particular offering for that there. However, if you want to do a much more grassroots, lower budget, much more focused product introduction, while a conference can help, you also can be the one running your own event. And the sky's the limit with how creative you can get. It depends. Like, for example, if your manufacturing facility, if your warehouse happens to have a classroom that seats 40, 50 people, I would for sure lean into the idea of having 40, 50 people come down for that. If that is way too small relative to the size of your prospect list or customer list, and you want way more people, then you look at, okay, where's nearby where you can rent out a room that seats 500 or 5,000 or whatever it's appropriate for your context for your particular product introduction. But again, unless you're doing a product introduction just for your channel partners and just for your own salespeople, your event likely needs to include the product launch, the product introduction as part of it, but you need to provide some additional value that helps to educate and share some best practices and some methodologies that's directly related to your new product introduction. In other words, your employees and your channel partners absolutely positively need the insider track on this. And probably you're launching this to them a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks ahead of time. You may even be practicing on them and getting some feedback before you do your broader launch. But for everyone else, you will likely want to wrap the product introduction and some background information about what's going on in the industry, how others are approaching this particular problem today, what the status quo looks like, why the status quo is falling short of helping people achieve what they're looking to do with power and signal connectivity, and how you've gone and figured out a way to provide way more benefits and a much better, much more reliable, much more cost-effective way of addressing this going forward. And that's the reason why you developed. But again, wrap it in education, wrap it in helping to provide some value to them beyond just them sitting through an infomercial for your new product launch. So that's what I'd be thinking about. Obviously, you need a good landing page, you need an explainer video, you need digital ads, you need a lot of email marketing, a lot of social media posts leading into it. Very, very partial for having your beta testers, your early adopters in different segments be actively involved in providing, being interviewed in a video case study, being available at these live events, whether they're in person or whether they're virtual, to chime in on the value and potentially be part of the Q&A with the audience. I'm very, very partial to like these fireside chats where your audience can ask questions of your chief engineering officer, chief technologist, or CEO or founder, whoever is involved in building this, as well as some of the early use cases or the early users of that. So that's what I've been leaning on. Obviously, for the live events, record everything and make the replay available for everyone that wanted to attend but couldn't. You could make it available gated if you really want to. I would probably encourage you to have it ungated, available for people to watch later on all the core channels that are important, like LinkedIn events and YouTube Live and similar kinds of places. And then, of course, you can cut it up in pieces for the person that wants to watch the 3-minute version or the 37-second version, or wants to see a carousel PDF infographic kind of version, or whatever is especially relevant for what you're looking to do. Maybe there's quizzes or calculators that you build to help support the launch so people can walk through their metrics, their starting key performance indicators, to see if they're a good fit for this particular new platform that you developed around data center power and signal connectivity. But that's what I'd be thinking about for a new product introduction. Typically, the person on the team, on your team, that's going to take the lead with this would be your chief product officer, your CPO, or your VP of product management, or your product managers. And it's highly likely that you're working on planning this new product introduction with a minimum of a 60 to 90 day lead time to maximize visibility on what you're looking to do. But yeah, the basics, just like any campaign: set a goal, set a soft goal, set a hard goal, figure out who the ICP is, the ideal client profile, figure out who the core segments are, figure out the core messaging that's most going to resonate with each of those segments, figure out if you need more than one landing page or some micro content within the pages or some micro videos. And of course, if there's direct and indirect sales force in your case, if you have like channel partners, which for power and signal connectivity would probably be like MEP, mechanical, electrical, or electricians, or sustainability consultants, or anyone else that gets involved in the supply chain of power and signal connectivity. Yeah, for sure, customize and reach out to as many of those folks as well to help amplify overall what you're doing with your new product introduction, with your new launch. So that's what I'd be thinking about for data center power and signal connectivity, for planning a new product introduction. Micro plan, document the heck out of what's working and what's working and what's not working, so you can keep improving over time. Needless to say, if this isn't the first time you've done a new product introduction, of course, look back at what you did most recently, and most recently before that, 2-3 launches before that, and see if there's learnings that you want to filter in. But yeah, I would lean into the idea that the less they're on the payroll to hear about your particular event, the more you get out to outside of your core 100, your core 1000, your most important accounts, the more likely it is that you're going to want to wrap this new product introduction in some education, in some content, and some thought leadership that's way beyond just the introduction itself, that addresses the bigger macro problem about what's going on in their job and their team and in their company, that your new data center product and signal connectivity launch directly and indirectly addresses. Again, this is likely messaging that your product manager has been working on with your marketing team for months. This has likely been very, very well refined as you've gotten user interviews, feedback from your early users who got access to your new product, your new platform, weeks and months before launch. So I would wrap all of that into the above to plan that new product introduction. So that's overall the playbook that I'd be thinking about for how a new data center power and signal connectivity company who plan a successful new product introduction, specifically within the facilities segment of the data center ecosystem. If you want to make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events like this and get invited to upcoming live streams of data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A, as well as similar educational events and resources. Be sure to subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter. You can do so for free directly on our website at www.dcsmi.com. This way you get notified each and every Sunday about new educational events opportunities just like this. Again, that's at www.dcsmi.com. Okay, what is up next? How does a data center sales and marketing team leadership review and redirect focus? How do data center sales and marketing team leadership review and redirect focus? That is a terrific question. I want to start with the idea that reviewing and redirecting focus should not be happening with alarming levels of frequency. One of the chief complaints that I hear about personally with our own clients and peer groups, and that is all over LinkedIn with marketing and go-to-market professionals and sales enablement and marketing ops and sales ops folks, is when they're working for companies that are constantly changing strategy before it has time to even get fully rolled out and have a chance for the data and the feedback to roll in. And what that usually signals is that there's a lack of leadership understanding about what the business actually is and what's trying to accomplish, and that there's a whole bunch of people sitting at like the board level who have wildly unrealistic expectations about timelines and time to value and ramp time relative to the resources that your company is actually able to put into this various kinds of initiatives. So when you do this the right way and you're setting your objectives and your goals on an annual basis, and you're getting way more specific about your top 3 OKRs, your objectives and key results, which should not change more than once a quarter at the absolute most, then you shouldn't be reviewing and redirecting focus all that often. What's more important is when you do your weekly stand-ups or whatever cadence you're using to make sure that your team is on track and looking at leaderboards and looking at dashboards, it really is a matter of making sure that the focus is on that top 3 list, and that it's not drifting and it's not being distracted away to adjacencies that move your team's energy and efforts away from what is truly top of mind. So in terms of reviewing and redirecting focus, unless your leadership team has determined that mid-quarter, mid-year, that there's going to be a rapid unintended pivot because of some completely black swan exogenous event that wasn't predictable, which the reality is we went through exactly that in 2020 and Q1, Q2 of 2020. But barring that kind of events, it's incredibly important that you understand that your leadership team understands ramp time, that it understands average sales cycle length, that it understands how many cycles a typical new hire needs to be through to be fully ramped and have a good chance of meeting, exceeding quota. All of those reality checks will help to make sure that you don't go too far astray from those original goals and key performance indicators and objectives and key results that you're working on. The challenge with a lot of this as well, especially for digital marketers, is the attribution models of keeping track of what's working and what's not are very, very broken relative to how effective they were at tracking cookies and analytics and things like that as recently as 5 or 10 years ago. It started with Apple and privacy folks deciding to block third-party cookies. For probably a period of 2 or 3 years, Google kept going back and forth about whether they're going to get rid of third-party cookies or not. It's still, because they haven't figured out a better alternative, it's still pretty much a factor. But what none of that accounts for is this whole idea of dark social. And if you've ever had fierce debates internally about what's working and what's not, the idea of dark social may have come up. What dark social means is that there's something or some things that had a dramatic impact on a lead being generated, on an opportunity being accelerated, on a deal getting across the finish line. And it's not showing up in any of your marketing technology. It's not showing up in any of your analytics because it's just not something that can be measured. It's a conversation on someone's internal Slack that causes them to go book a meeting with your sales team, or on a Reddit forum, or on they listened to a podcast, or they had a conversation on LinkedIn. Like, none of this makes it into your analytics. What typically does happen, or they had a conversation at an event over a beer or over coffee at a conference. All of these can dramatically impact the quality and quantity of leads that are coming in. But a lot of times you mistakenly think that you're attributing it to direct traffic, or you're attributing it to organic search or something like that, when in reality, there was 4, 5, 6 steps that led to that had much, much bigger impact. And it's kind of like your SEO, your search engine optimization or search engine marketing SEM person is standing at the cash register, intercepting people and ripping up the slip from the salesperson that says, give this to the person so that I properly get credit for this. So what a lot of companies have moved to at a pretty simplistic, pretty easy to implement level over the last couple of years is they've gone back to self-reporting attribution. What does self-reporting attribution means? Well, you likely have a lot of lead generation forms on your website for things like newsletter subscriptions, ebook, report kind of white paper kind of downloads, webinar registrations, breakfast seminar registrations. Every time someone fills out a form, you have a write-in field that says, how did you hear about us? And they write in words there, and you may decide that you want that to be a required contact property, a required field. At DCSMI, we actually have it set up as a required field. Worst case scenario, if they don't feel like answering, they'll put a dash or a period or something in there. But most people do answer. Some people answer in crazy amounts of detail. Other people have like 1 or 2 word answers. But in aggregate, this gives you incredible insights about what's working and can be quite different than what you think is actually working relative to what's actually working. And the cool part with this is not only does it put that write-in information on that particular user's contact record in your CRM, when you look at the account level, and say, for example, you have a target account and you currently have 8 lead generation conversions that have happened in that target account. Some of them were newsletters, some of them were ebooks, some of them were webinars, some of them were lunch and learns. So there's 8 different people that have opted in. 6 out of 8 of those people wrote in some good, meaningful information on how'd you hear about us. 2 of them put in like a dash or a period or something. They don't want to be bothered, or they're playing games. So you have 6 votes there. So the question is, when you look at those 6 votes, are they all saying the same thing, or are they saying radically different things? If you are the sales development rep, business development rep, account executive working that account, that information is incredibly valuable. If you are on your marketing team, if you're figuring out go-to-market strategy, aggregating not at the account level, but across the buyer persona level, or in aggregate in general, is incredibly valuable to figure out what's working and what's not. And as you look at closed deals that go all the way to closed won, WON, and you look at your newly generated sales, same thing. You can go back and see on your last 10, 20, 30 sales, whatever it is, what was the self-reported attribution? What did the user write in for how they heard about you at first? Another thing that a lot of people do is when a salesperson, when an account executive on your team goes to create a new deal, goes to move a opportunity across the various deal stage to generate a proposal or generate an agreement, there is a required contact property that you fill out internally that forces your salesperson to get an answer from the prospect at that point on how they hear about us. You can have the same thing for your account manager when they kick off onboarding. How'd you find us? And with any luck, all 3 of those answers, the answer that the contact that the lead types in, and what your account executive reports that they heard from the prospect. And of course, you can audit that and spot check and fact check it with your sales ops folks if you'd like. And the same thing with your account manager. So in aggregate, you start to get a real strong sense about what's working versus what's not. So that can help a lot with solving some of the attribution problems. But in terms of like reviewing and redirecting focus, for a lot of, depends on how big your company is and your sophistication level of the playbook that you're running. But for a lot of smaller companies, ones that are below like 200 employees that don't have at least 3, 4, or 5 people on your marketing team, marketing ops and sales ops. A lot of times the basics of getting really crisp on your ideal client profile and taking time to build out well-researched buyer personas and revamping the website copywriting to focus on what buyer personas really have that's top of mind, and making that a huge part of your email marketing strategy and social media strategy and event strategy and email templates and sales enablement and channel partner enablement. The better job you do with infusing real data from real users as opposed to just guesses and keeping that current, the more you're going to resonate, the more relevant, the more empathetic, the better everything tends to work in the first place. And when it's not working, that's a lot of times where you see these last minute scrambles and trying to accomplish things in a few days that usually need a few months to make work. So in terms of reviewing and redirecting focus, it starts with those clear goals. It starts with the SMART goals. SMART, if you've never come across that framework before, stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Time-bound is super important. Attainable, super important. When people set crazy unrealistic goals, as often can happen with relatively early stage companies when they go for like a first or second funding round and they get new board members who come on board that you think have your best interest, and they have their best interests at heart, but sometimes they lack the hands-on experience of having been an operator in a similar size company at a similar stage in a similar industry. They may suggest things that are very relevant to a enterprise company that are completely terrible advice for an early stage company with a couple dozen or 100 or 200 employees. So yeah, it's super, super important to make sure that the focus is set right out of the gate. It's also really, really important to understand the concept of the self-directed, the self-driven buyer's journey, and that salespeople just don't have anywhere near the access that they used to the prospects and clients, and that changes, really dramatically changes the nature of your playbook and really forces you to have much better alignment across your marketers, your sales, your account managers, and that you collectively work on cutting through the noise and showing up in a way that you can be part of your prospects and your future clients' professional development and learning and development process. So you're really truly seen as experts and subject matter experts and trusted advisors, as opposed to just vendors. A lot of companies in the data center industry sabotage themselves by thinking that they're getting out of the vendor box and that they're not commoditized, when in reality, you're not the one that gets to decide if you're commoditized. It's the marketplace. And typically the symptoms of being badly commoditized are a very much lagging indicator, like haggling, being forced to discount, aggressively using discounts to close because you didn't truly have a good consultative process to anchor what you're doing to their value. All of the above are usually symptoms that something is very, very broken and living in a wishful thinking era of 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I am a strong believer of not only aligning your teams, but shared learning and development among your teams. So yes, there's a lot to keep track of, but it's also incredibly, incredibly important to make sure that you're not siloed. Because if marketing's being judged on different metrics and different success than sales, and sales is being judged on different success than customer success or account management post-sales, then everyone's fighting for basically their own compensation, their own job, their own relevance, as opposed to optimizing for what's A, most important to the company, and B, most important to the user. Remember, if you have a very disjointed, fragmented process, if you have multiple CRM and CRM-like systems that are not well integrated together, there's a really good chance that your prospects and customers are having a really crappy user experience as well. And that's making your job 10 times harder as well. So you may think that your prospects, that your future clients, that your channel partners have no idea what kind of chaos and what kind of toxicity or whatever it is going on internally. They know. There's only so much you can do to disguise that. That's why it's so important to think about both the internal friction and the external friction. And when you're spending a huge amount of time having to play defense, having to do cleanup, having to review and redirect focus, it's usually a symptom of something bigger that's missing in terms of alignment and leadership. And if you're running sales and marketing the same way you did 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's usually a lot more broken than you realize, because unless your buyer personas that you're selling to are like 85, 90 years old and are extremely digital resistant and don't use smartphones and have never heard of ChatGPT and have never watched a YouTube video and don't use LinkedIn and don't attend webinars, like all of these digitally enabled channels have all reached mainstream tipping points. I'm like on the younger to mid-side of Gen X. All of my friends and colleagues that are baby boomers that are still working full-time, in most cases probably now more working part-time as like advisors or consultants in the data center industry, they've all made these shifts. Like if I want to reach one of them, I could send them an email, but it's far more likely that I'm going to get a quicker response on LinkedIn. If they're speaking at a conference, on a panel or a keynote or at a webinar, and they share something really cool on a slide and you take a photo of that slide and you mention them, great point by at first, at last, whatever their name is, really enjoyed your take on how to rethink how we measure PUE for North America, regardless of whether there's a sustainability directive or not. Totally agree, whatever. You'll know this is working because they get off the stage and 15 minutes after they're off the stage, they're hitting the like button and they're commenting back. They're digitally transformed as well. So like if you're talking yourself into a reality of thinking that the golf tournament, the cabana party, the ball game are way more impactful than the digital self-driven journey that's 7 by 24 by 365. Like, I don't know what else to tell you except go do your homework and find out how your prospects and clients have actually changed, not where you'd like them to be, but where they actually are. There's a really good chance that you're dramatically mistargeting based on your bad assumption, based on your off base assumptions that you think that they're living in a time warp when they're actually they're keeping up with you just as much as you're keeping up, in the same way that you're using ChatGPT and Copilot and all those LLM tools all day long. They're using them as well. So if you're doing things the same way you're doing, that you've always done them, there's a really good chance that you're going to be spending a huge amount of time with your leadership reviewing and redirecting focus, as opposed to getting meaningful pipeline generation going and educating and building trust and becoming a core part of the early and middle stages of their buyer journeys and really shaping the criteria and pointing them in the right direction. And while you're distracted with nonsense, you're leaving the door wide open for one of your competitors to come in and follow the modern playbook for educating and building trust early and often. So that's what I'd be thinking about for how a data center sales and marketing team leadership can review and redirect focus. You're so much better off if you can get the strategy right out of the gate, as opposed to spending cleanup and catch up and creating this chaotic environment. If the people on your team don't trust each other, you've lost before you've even started. So that's a core part of this as well, of driving alignment and eliminating internal friction to provide. You're looking to create a world-class customer experience, client experience, user experience. It starts with having a world-class internal experience as well. Chaos internally leads to chaos externally. So get your house in order first if you want to be able to make sure that your focus, that your sales and marketing focus is in the right places to not only optimize for what's most important to individuals, to your team, to your company, but optimizing for your prospect and client experience and playing the long game as well. So those are some of the key considerations that I'd be thinking about for how a data center sales and marketing team leadership can review and redirect focus. If you're getting good value so far from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, please help us spread the word by hitting the like button on whatever platform that you're watching on. We're going to take a real quick break now for a message from our sponsor. And when we come back, we'll tackle 3 more of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about from all over the data center ecosystem.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Hey there, Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. And you're watching Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A, where each week we tackle a handful of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about from all over the data center, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities ecosystem. If you have an idea for a topic or a question or a challenge that you think we should address in an upcoming episode, something that's really, really top of mind that's driving you nuts, be sure to leave that in the comments on whatever platform that you're watching on, and we will add that topic or question or challenge to our queue of topics to address in upcoming episodes. So what's up next? Now we're going to dive into a topic that is top of mind for not only marketing, but how marketing collaborates with other stakeholders within your company, especially across sales and account management and product and even channel partnerships. So how do you create more data center content? How do you create more data center content? That's a terrific question. And 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for sure, content was something that was really owned by marketing, and it was very rare for others outside of marketing to get involved on a regular basis. But the world has changed so much now that it is super important for marketing to treat content as something that they work on with multiple teams within your company. Why is this so important? Because 10 years ago, when it comes to the data center industry, regardless of whether we're talking about data center operators or tech or facilities or construction or real estate or investment, 10 years ago, your prioritized buyer personas, your ideal clients, were doing quite a bit of research on their own before they met with you. At the time, 10 years ago, CEB, the corporate executive board that's now owned by Gartner, did research for Salesforce and SiriusDecisions, and they discovered that roughly a little more than half of a typical sales cycle, half of a buyer's journey, was happening without you in the room. Your users, your prospects, your future clients were doing lots of searches on Google. They were watching YouTube videos. They were listening to podcasts. They were attending webinars. They were reading online reviews, and they were asking lots of questions of their peers on LinkedIn. And all of that is still very much in the buyer behaviors of most core buyer personas in the data center ecosystem. The only one that's changed a little bit, and it's going to continue to change a lot a bit, is instead of using traditional search, where someone's like, what's the best liquid cooling solution for a hyperscale data center in the Nordics? Instead of that traditional search happening on Google and one by one them clicking the 10 blue links and reading that, and now they're just taking the exact same thing and perhaps even having a longer conversational search, and they're going directly with that search to ChatGPT or Copilot or one of the other or Gemini or one of the other LLM chat apps that are out there. So yes, and then even if they are using Google, there's a really good chance that that search doesn't result in a click to your site. It's been 10 years in the making, but we're now to the point where most 60-70%, and it's accelerating even more, most questions that you'd ask of Google that show up in its AI Essentials feature answer the question immediately without having to click through. There's citations there for people that do want to click through, but most will not. So the behaviors have changed quite dramatically. And because of that, people, especially highly technical, highly cynical, highly skeptical IT professionals and engineers and all the most common stakeholders that show up on your radar screen of people that you want to be educating and building trust with, building awareness with, in and around the data center ecosystem, they're more sales allergic than they've ever been. Why? because they don't need to spend time with you anymore. They can not only lean on all the digital tools that they used 10 years ago, but now they have instant gratification, crazy speed, crazy thoroughness, crazy depth using the very tools that are the generative AI tools that are causing all the growth within the data center industry. So at the risk of oversimplifying it, you are in competition for attention with all these digital tools, especially the instant gratification experience that prospects and clients are getting from ChatGPT and similar kinds of chat applications. So the experience that they get from you really needs to be next level. And in most cases, in that self-driven journey where 83% of research and decision-making happens without you in the room, yes, well over 80%, on the way to 90%, of research and decision making now happens without you in the room, your content is taking the place of what used to happen in many one-on-one conversations on phone and Zoom calls and face-to-face conversations. They just don't, your core buyer personas don't want to spend time with sales anymore. So your content is taking the place of most of those conversations. You can say, well, what if we don't provide the content? They'll be forced to book time with sales. No. They're going to get the answers they want from a company that competes with you, directly or indirectly competes with you, or non-business model competes with you, or they're going to get the answer from the chat apps. So it is for sure in your interest to play a very, very active role in content creation, content distribution that educates and builds trust about the dozens or hundreds of topics that are hyper relevant to your core buyer personas at the intersection of your product or service category. So what this means is, even though search engine optimization and search engine marketing are not going to be as impactful as they used to be, a very similar kind of approach of delivering crazy amounts of thought leadership and expertise through content, through educational events, through video, through podcasts, through all of the above is more important than ever as a trust signal for ChatGPT and Copilot and all those similar apps to recommend your company when someone says, who are the leading liquid cooling companies that I should be considering in the US, in Singapore, in India, and Northern Europe, wherever is your particular case. And like, people in the data center industry have gotten fooled into thinking that everything can be solved by pulling out a credit card. After all, most of the conference visibility in the ecosystem has turned into pay to play. Most of the media companies have turned into pay to play. And before you blow up my inbox with hate mail on that, like, keep digging. A lot of what you think is earned is actually purchased. And even if it's not, most of the time, the companies that are providing this earned visibility are doing it with the idea that it's a freebie in year one, and they're going to hard sell year two as pay to play. All of even the social media platforms, like 10, 15 years ago, when Facebook started to become really, really big with businesses, everyone knows someone that built up hundreds of thousands or millions of page followers, only to find out that the organic visibility on that dropped to almost nothing. And then Zuckerberg and company shows up and says, oh, you can reach all those exact same people, boost post, buy ads. LinkedIn had great organic reach for a while. LinkedIn's turning into pay to play. Search, same deal. You want visibility now? Actually, that's an interesting side note also when we're talking about content marketing and content creation and content production. Look at a search engine results page today compared to 5 years ago, and look at how much of that page below the AI Essentials is taken up with ads before you even get to the first organic results. And I get it. Alphabet, Google, publicly traded company, they have shareholders to be responsible to. There's massive, massive competitive wars going on for LLM supremacy between Alphabet and OpenAI, and Meta wants in on, they all want in on this. Ironically, for anyone that was counting Google out because of changing search behaviors, Google just had a blowout quarter a couple of weeks ago. So talk about like massively reinventing itself. How does this help you, though, create more data center content? So the playbook that I'd recommend for content strategy, regardless of what your company does in the data center ecosystem, is get extreme clarity on that ideal client profile. Know geographically where they're located, how big or small their companies are, and what industries they tend to be located in, industries that are a really good fit for you and industries that are a terrible fit for you. After you define at the account level or the company level what you're trying to do, then we want to drill into the individual user level. That's where your buyer personas come into play. And buyer personas, in much the same way that your ideal client profile is really important for distribution and promotion of content at the account level, buyer personas at the individual stakeholder level are very, very important for figuring out what to talk about in your content. So there's a primary buyer persona, there's a secondary buyer persona, the most important and second most important economic stakeholder. There can be a tertiary buyer persona. If you have a larger company and really big decision committees, there may be significantly more than 3 or 4 segments that you decide to research and create content for. But in terms of like extreme client centricity and creating more content, if there's 10 or 12 big goals, 10 or 12 big challenges, or whatever it is that's especially relevant for that particular buyer persona, that's the starting point for your content strategy, is making sure that you have an amazingly helpful set of content assets that address that exact topic in your buyer persona's own words. Not the words that you think that topic is or that challenge is, but what they actually articulated when you did your homework with user interviews, surveys, studying CRM records, studying their LinkedIn profiles, or all of the above. Content, again, is taking the place of what used to happen in face-to-face conversations. And 10 years ago, video was a nice to have. Today, without video, you're completely invisible. Video is kind of the last place for where traditional search engine optimization is still working largely the same way that it did 5-10 years ago. So it plays a tremendous, tremendous role in topical visibility because YouTube's the second most popular search engine in the world and has been for a really long time. LinkedIn keeps moving ever more video centric, and it's not just long form video. It's not just short form video. The vertical videos have an incredible impact. Like 5 years ago, people just thought vertical videos were limited to like TikTok and kids playing around and goofy entertainment kind of stuff. And then they moved to Instagram, they moved to Facebook, they moved to YouTube Shorts, they moved into LinkedIn natively. And yeah, your prospects and clients have no attention span anymore. Some of them will watch the full 60-minute webinar recording. Some of them will watch a 7-minute clip excerpt pulled out of that webinar recording. Some of them are only going to watch the 31-second YouTube short or LinkedIn vertical video that came out of that. And they'll watch 2 or 3 of those and they'll be like, oh, this is pretty interesting. Now I'm ready to watch the whole recording. So yeah, in terms of content, be as client-centric as possible. I'm a huge believer in starting with video first and then repurposing from video to audio and images and text. Start with long form content and then repurpose down to short form content and cover all the platforms that really matter across the data center ecosystem. Most of the core buyer personas, again, do your own homework, do your own research to validate this for your focus. But for most of the core buyer personas, LinkedIn by far and away is the most influential. I mean, we're at the point now where there's over 1 billion users on LinkedIn. So your internal champions are there. Their coworkers are there. So yeah, make sure that you have 3, 4, 5 different strategies for saturating on LinkedIn, both organic and paid and events and all of the different vectors for getting visibility among your target accounts. That helps to educate and build trust on LinkedIn. YouTube is incredibly important, not just because the more they watch, the more they're bought in, the more you're able to build a deep emotional bond, but in a lot of ways, it's taking the place of what used to happen in traditional search. It's extremely, extremely common to find that embedding videos on website pages almost always increases the amount of time that someone spends on the website page and the likelihood for them to take next steps and respond to your call to action. But big picture, for a lot of companies, these are culture changes. You're not creating anywhere near the volume of content that you need to be competitive, and that's an enormous, enormous problem. The reality is, if you're truly self-aware about how much these buyer behaviors have changed, how much the self-driven journey has become the predominant journey. Like if you have one person on your team who spends 10 or 20% of their job on content, it's not going to work. You're literally like not showing up. You're, for all intents and purposes, invisible. Because if you look at the slightly bigger companies in your space and the much bigger companies in your space, they're all investing very, very aggressively in video first content to saturate all of these organic channels, because that's where all the attention is. Why do you think traditional broadcast TV is having a moment of existential, like, are we going to survive or not? Because all of the attention is going to strategic organic search. That's where people are getting their news. That's where they're learning. That's where discovery is happening. The channels don't even need people to be subscribing anymore or following anymore. They know that when you watch 100% of a video on a particular topic, they're going to serve you another video, either from that creator, that channel, or someone else on that particular topic. And once they know that you love to watch penetration testing videos or liquid cooling videos or physical security videos or whatever it is that's relevant to your job, they're just going to keep serving you more and more and more. It's no big surprise that like Facebook Meta 10 years ago was getting fanatical at trying to improve the amount of minutes that you spent on its platform, to the point where it's now well over an hour. All of the platforms are looking to do the same thing. The longer you stay, the more ads they can sell you and the more they can monopolize your attention. So your goal should be to have such fantastic content that you're monopolizing the attention, because your core buyer personas are learning so much from your subject matter experts that are featured in this content. No big surprise that over at DCSMI, we're huge believers in webinars and podcasting, interview-based podcasting, Q&A kind of podcasting, exactly like you're watching. When done well, consistently, early and often, game-changing impact for educating and building trust with your core buyer personas. But for a lot of companies, these are big culture changes. Maybe do one less golf tournament next year, one less cocktail party next year. Maybe look at the 20 conferences you go to and fire the bottom 10% next year that you know for a long time have not been working, and instead redirect those resources into content creation and content promotion. You know, it's the very definition of being an entrepreneur, right? Is taking resources away from low yield activities and redirecting them to higher yield activities. We know where the attention is. We know where the buyer preferences are. If you're struggling to create more data center content, it usually is a problem that needs to start at the top. If you're a small to mid-sized company, meaning you're up to a few hundred employees, changing the culture like that needs to start all the way at the CEO. If you're a mid-market or enterprise company, it's probably a division managing partner, managing director, division vice president kind of initiative. And at an enterprise, pretty much the same deal. So yeah, I mean, these are big, big culture changes that need to happen, because co-location companies, operators in the US are so far away from figuring this out in most cases, because they censor and muzzle their employees from participating. And like, you know, a typical co-location operator, there's usually 5 or 10 people that are trained and allowed to speak to media or participate in a panel or be on a podcast. And may as well put it out there. There is no difference when someone that works as like an account executive or a marketer or product manager or something like that works for a co-location operator. There's no difference between them being allowed to be on my podcast, on the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast that may be viewed by a couple dozen or a couple hundred people, versus giving them permission to go on CNBC or Bloomberg or BBC or something like that, or be interviewed in the Wall Street Journal. They're literally, they consider them one and the same. And as a result, there's a very, very short list of authorized media personalities in any given company. And as a result, it's a very sanitized, very scripted kind of content, and there's not nearly enough content to be competitive. Forgetting about all the nooks and crannies and sub-personas and fragments that make a channel partner program appropriate in the first place. There's just not nearly enough content. There's not the authenticity. So these are culture problems. And the weird part is it seems strange to be dunking on Americans in this particular case, but I found it's actually quite a lot of these restrictions on censoring and muzzling employees from participating in podcasts and panels is something that seems to be much bigger in the US than it is in countries outside the US. I'm 150 episodes into the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, and there's a lot of data to back up that assertion. Like, there's literally in a lot of companies very, very short lists of folks that are allowed to be on panels and be interviewed by media. Another soapbox kind of moment on creating more data center content while we're on the soapbox here is we've tried from day one to keep a 50-50 rate. We know that the data center industry is a male-centric industry and that no one's deliberate, at least we're certainly not trying to exclude anyone. But we know, like, you go to a typical conference and 70 or 80% or more of the attendees are male versus female. We've been trying to fix that since day one. It breaks my heart when we have a fantastic guest that we've invited on that helps to improve the ratio there. That's a great woman leader, great woman marketer, sales leader, whatever it is. And they're literally getting blocked from their employer from coming on. They want to come on the podcast, but they're literally blocked. They're not allowed permission to be able to do that. So, like, yeah, these are all the things that prevents there being great content out there that inspires more women to go into data center sales or marketing or product or solution engineering, because someone at the uppermost echelon leaders of the company decided that there could only be a handful of people that are involved in the content creation process with all this. So again, when I say that these are problems, these are challenges with creating more content that many times need to start all the way at the CEO and the board level. It isn't just hiring more, it's changing the culture for your company to realize that the path forward is to basically create your own media company. So you're not having to rent and buy attention and pretend that you earn the attention. So you actually have your own media. You think about a classical playbook around this is you have paid media, you have earned media, and you have owned media. Paid media is pretty straightforward. You're buying an ad, you're buying a sponsorship, you're buying a booth. Earned media used to have a very well-respected line between paid and earned. It has never been more blurry today. People buying exposure to be on the cover of a magazine as the #1 data center fill in the blank of the year. People buying inclusion into who's list. People buying in participation in the Forbes contributor. Like, all of this stuff, like, I don't know who thinks that they're trying to I don't know who thinks that their buyer personas are uneducated enough and unsophisticated enough that they don't see through most of this. When we talk about why the data center industry has a trust problem, masquerading and pretending like advertorials are actually editorials is not doing anyone any favors at earning trust versus eroding trust. So when we talk about paid media and earned media, paid events and earned events, there is a massive credibility problem in this industry right now, where there's an incredibly blurry line between earning attention and buying attention. Is it prostitution? Is it paying people to be your friends? I don't know, but I can tell you that having been in this space on the data center side for well over a decade and on the managed services integrator side for 10, 15 years before that, the line, death by 1,000 paper cuts. It keeps getting blurring and blurring and blurring. I would encourage you, if you want to have world-class content that helps you completely saturate your ideal client profile and your buyer personas and dominate the journey, stop spending crazy amounts of time in these attention wars with that very blurry line between paid and earned, and go all in on owned media and owned events. Owned media, great blog, great newsletter, great social channels, great podcasts, and on the event side, great webinars, great lunch and learns, great breakfast seminars. And the cool part with all of this is your out-of-pocket costs are really limited to labor and productivity. And instead of paying the toll taker all the time and having these massive trust deteriorations and faking your editorial, which is really advertorial, and all these nonsense games that erode trust, again, culture mindset. Most of this doesn't get fixed at the CMO level or the marketing VP level or the marketing director level or the sales enablement level. That's just execution, strategy and execution. The mindset and the culture starts at the top. If you want to create more content, if you want to create content that really moves the needle in terms of lead generation, sales acceleration, trust building, educating and building trust, it starts at the top, leading by example with common sense strategy that helps this filter throughout the organization. Look, when it comes to building a brand, I talk about this quite often, but it's really worth reiterating in this context. 10 years ago, your brand used to be owned by a creative director. It was all about the hexadecimal colors and the approved fonts and the logos. And yeah, that's still an issue. Canva and Adobe Express, especially Canva. Canva comes up constantly as a favorite tool on the podcast. It's democratized that. And yes, aesthetics still matter a lot for a brand, but today your brand is about so much more than that. Your brand is about what people say about your company and your team members when you're not in the room. And given that you're not in the room 83% of the time anymore, you're only in there for the final 17%, what people say about your company and your stakeholders really matters a ton. All the conversations that used to happen in the early and the middle part of the journey, unless you're really good at professional development and learning development, having great educational events, you're not part of that first 83% anymore. Your content is the proxy that gets you in there early and often, which is the reason why blogging once a month, having a new YouTube once a month, having a webinar every so often, like, it's not going to cut it. Think like a media company that's focused on creating amazing educational content experiences and educational event experiences for your most important buyer personas. That's so good that it runs circles around anything you could possibly buy your way into in the data center industry. The default playbook doesn't have to be 80% of your resources going to the toll takers with the huge conferences and the huge media companies. Not that hard to have a fantastic blog, fantastic YouTube channel, fantastic webinars, fantastic lunch and learns, breakfast seminars. What is hard is the persistence and the perseverance to stick with it long enough to dramatically saturate the surface area. You can't expect to sit on the sidelines for the first 10, 15 years that the channel exists and then decide tomorrow, like, we're going to go all in and expect that you're going to overcome 15 years of being missing in action in 15 days or 15 weeks, if only. And the inclination is, well, can't we just spend money to speed up? Can, to a certain degree. There's definitely amplification options. But if your CFO is involved and you care about like unit economics and cost per acquisition and client acquisition costs and all that other stuff, more than likely you're going to want to play the long game with evergreen content. And again, to win in evergreen content, to get found early and often by the right people, the right places, the right time, and in the right context, so that your team members and your company are seen as the go-to experts when it comes to anything and everything in your particular niche within the data center ecosystem. This is a culture issue. This is a resources issue. This is an alignment issue, way, way, way more than just buying attention. Play the long game early and often. Make this a huge, huge part of your culture going forward. That's what I'd be thinking about for how to create more data center content and make it all about them. Yeah, you need some product marketing information. You need some core stuff on your website, but that should be the extent of you talking about how wonderful you are. Most of your content, 80 or 90% of your content, should be about solving problems and achieving goals among your most important buyer personas. The what's in it for me. And it's not about you, it's about them. The better job you can be at truly being client-centric, the more effective your content is at getting this all done. And multiple people within your company, multiple perspectives need to be involved. Yes, I know it's scary, it's a loss of control, but you spend likely obscene amounts of money on sales kickoff events and alignments and workshops and everything. Make this part of that going forward while there's still time to be relevant. The longer you let this go, the more likely it is that your competitors are getting in early and often, and eventually you're going to take away all the oxygen from your sales funnel and your opportunities, and you'll start to lose share if you aren't losing share already. At the minimum, your costs are likely way, way higher than they need to be because you're paying people to be their friends. You're literally bribing them to get them to pay attention to you as opposed to earning it. You really want to pay people to be your friends, or do you want to earn it? You want to attract the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all, the right context, because you're providing extreme value in educating and building trust with the biggest goals and the challenges that each of your core buyer personas are facing. Those are all the considerations that I'd be thinking about for creating more data center content. If you're getting good value so far from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you help spread the word by hitting the like button on whatever platform that you're watching. And if you're listening on one of the audio platforms, please take a few moments to rate and review that. We'd be super, super appreciative. Thanks so much. So next, we're going to talk about a strategy for lead generation and sales cycle acceleration that is currently being very underutilized, and it shouldn't be, because in a self-driven journey where you're trying to build and protect your awareness and protect your margins and your company's long-term viability and intermediate-term viability and short-term viability, it's really, really important. So the question is, how do we generate leads for self-hosted data center events? How do we improve our lead generation for data center events that we're hosting ourselves? So to put this in context, by default, when I say data center related events, most people are thinking that they're going to attend or exhibit at, sponsor at, or speak at a large national or global data center conference. And I don't want to say there's nothing wrong with it, because there can be some things wrong with it. But at the end of the day, the most important part of evaluating individual conferences is to evaluate individual conferences to decide if they're a good fit for who you're actually trying to reach. I see massive, massive amounts of being asleep at the wheel on that, massive amounts of negligence and lack of the most basic of basic due diligence on deciding to invest in attending or sponsoring, exhibiting, or speaking at a particular conference. So what's the basic due diligence? On the left-hand side of the screen, pull up their media kit, their prospectus that has the demographics from last year and who they think is going to be at that event this year. That's on the left-hand side of your screen. On the right-hand side of the screen, pull up your ideal client profile and pull up your prioritized buyer personas. And simply read their prospectus, read the PDF, read the page where they talk about who they expect to be there, who's been there historically, and compare it to yours. Compare it to your prioritized segments. If there's a really good match, if you think there's like 80, 90% of the people that are attending are a really good fit for who you're trying to reach, that's a pretty good conference. I would still try as hard as you can to get the earned editorial speaking slots for a member, for you or a member of your team, just because that's the best way to educate and build trust at that conference. But if you're finding a particular conference has like at least 80% of the people that are there are either directly or very closely related to your core buyer personas, your 2, 3, 4 core buyer personas and ideal client profile, that's a pretty good conference for you to stay invested in. The flip side, at the other extreme, if you, on the left-hand side of the screen, have their demographics, their media kit, their prospectus, and the right-hand side of the screen, you have your ideal client profile and buyer personas, and you discover there's only like a 10 or 20% match rate, meaning like 80 or 90% of the people that are attending are not even remotely close to your ideal client profile or prioritized buyer personas, you have a needle in a haystack situation. And I think that's beyond risky. It's negligent. It shows a complete lack of due diligence to be a good steward of your company's resources with your fiduciary responsibilities of investing your budget in the right places. And if you make up, well, our competitors are there. Well, it goes back to like what I learned from my parents and grandparents when I was a little kid. If everyone was jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge, would you be jumping too? Like, the mob psychology is not going to help you with this. What is super, super important is having extreme discipline to look at who they're attracting versus who you want to be spending time with. If there's a really good match, go forth and attend, perhaps even sponsor. Ideally, be that 3% that's speaking. What do you mean by 3%? Well, 2,500 people at the conference, 75 speakers, it's 3%, right? And you're probably going to bring along 2 or 3 colleagues. So maybe 10% of the people there are either speakers or colleagues of the speakers, right? So the other 80% are either buying attention by the booth, or they're just the product or the captive audience whose attention is being sold to the people that have the booths, and indirectly sold to the people that are speaking, that are waiving a speaking fee in return for having access to you, the captive audience. So now we have that out of the way. You start to see why self-hosted events, hosting your own events, can be so appealing. And before you say like, wow, hosting a conference is massively expensive and complicated, it is. But you don't need to host a conference. You could if you have those kind of resources. But for most people that are watching this, they're small to medium-sized companies. Pretty much everyone can do highly targeted, high-impact, low-cost events. What does that mean? If you have good clarity on your ideal client profile, which I hope you do, because we just used that as the basis for deciding what events to go to, and you have good clarity on your buyer personas, and you know what their 5 or 10 biggest goals and challenges are, because again, we just had that up on the screen to evaluate against your conference participation diligence. If you have that, then what I would encourage you to think about is how you take those 10 or 12 big goals and challenges and systematically once a month for the next 10 or 12 months, host an amazingly helpful educational event for each one of your most important buyer personas, each one of your most important segments. So let's say, for example, that there are 100 companies on your target account list for a particular team or territory, whatever it is. And at that company, with your enriched contacts that you have access to in your database, maybe on those 100 companies, there's 1,200 people that you want to get in front of multiple times over the next 6 to 12 months to be able to generate leads and create awareness and create pipeline with some of them. Those 1,200 people are the exact people that to invite to your breakfast seminar, to your lunch and learn, to your after hours educational event, to your webinar series, whatever it is. And you know your topic will resonate because you're only choosing topics that came up as high consensus for that particular segment when you did your buyer persona research. So that's the importance of capturing that customer insight in their own words. And when we get that right, the topic, the headline, the landing page, and everything is truly aligned. And you get much higher conversion rates, much higher registration rates. And then to build your surface area, not only among that individual in that company, but among their coworkers, it can be as simple as once they've registered, they get back an email, kind of simple marketing automation, email marketing automation that you've been able to do for the last 20 years, but pretty much no one does it, despite the fact that it being super easy to do it, is who else should attend? We know that when it comes to cybersecurity for hospital IT executives, it truly takes a village. There's people involved from cybersecurity, operations, support, engineering, finance, compliance, whatever. So given that, who else from your team or your coworkers would benefit from attending? Simply hit the forward button, add a thought or two on why this matters. And we know that teams that learn together grow together. That simple email probably takes you 30 minutes to set up, an update each time you do a new segment of that series can make a dramatic difference in getting multiple people from the same company to register and attend together, which means that you are driving alignment proactively in the formative stages, in the early and middle stages of the journey with your self-hosted events. The more relevant your topic is to what's top of mind for that buyer persona, the more interest, the more registrations. The better job you do of creating an amazingly helpful educational event where they learn a ton and they can't wait to go back to their coworkers and brag about, oh, you should have been here. This was amazing. The better job you do at that, the more likely it is that when part 2, part 3, part 4 comes around, that you start to see more and more people from that account coming together. And the mindset part with all this that's really important to overcome, both for you and your leadership team, is everyone in the data center industry seems to be brainwashed into thinking that an event needs to have hundreds or thousands of attendees to be effective for you. But we just talked about, if you have an event where 80 or 90% of the people that are attending are the wrong people for you, how effective can it possibly be, even if you're speaking? So let's play this out. 2,500 people at this event. Only 250 of those people are relevant for you. However, of those 250 people, half of them are crazy glued to their booth through the duration of the conference, meaning that only 125 are left. And those 125 that are left are being split among 5 different tracks competing for their attention. Not to mention all the people whose shoes are crazy glued to hanging out in the hallways instead of the breakout rooms for the duration of the conference. So you get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you start to realize that, is it really hundreds or thousands of people? No, it's a few handfuls of people. And when it's a few handfuls of people, I would encourage you to go all in on creating an amazing experience for those couple of handfuls of people, except instead of schlepping your team and paying for flights and hotels and really expensive foods and opportunity cost out of the office, just host this in your own conference room, your own classroom, on your own webinar. If your conference room holds 15, 20 people, and you can fill that up on the first Tuesday of the month, the first Wednesday of the month, whatever it is, month after month, like clockwork, amazing things will happen when you're filling up that room with the perfect people from your target accounts. And they're learning from your subject matter experts on topics that are highly relevant to them that you've identified through your meticulous buyer persona research. Of course, you need to have great event content. They're coming to learn from you. It should feel like professional development or learning and development. It definitely should not feel like a pitch or an infomercial. And because it's a small event, make it incredibly interactive, give them plenty of time to get their questions answered. At the end, certainly have a call to action for an offer, or giving them if you're a colo operator, give them a tour. If you do something with liquid cooling or power or something, of course, give them a demo for anyone that wants to see and learn more. But just doing that repeatedly, month after month, fantastic things start to happen. And what your CFO will love is the cost of doing these kinds of self-hosted events relative to attending, exhibiting, speaking at national and global conferences costs next to nothing. It's just time. And over time, the more of these you do month after month, you'll get better, you'll get faster, your results will continue to improve. But in terms of like out-of-pocket costs, you already have a CRM with your target accounts in it, right? You already have an email marketing platform that you're using for newsletters or other kinds of email marketing. So really no cost there, just time, figuring out the segmentation and the creative and the offer. Yes, I don't want to trivialize the time. It definitely, what I just named is easily a half a day of work each time you're setting up an event, and maybe another half a day of work for setting up the landing pages and getting together with your subject matter expert. And it could be a couple of days to build a fantastic deck and some handouts to go along with it. However, in terms of sheer out-of-pocket costs, it's your conference room. Anyone charging you by the hour to use your conference room? Maybe there's some internal wonky chargeback system or something like that, but for all intents and purposes, that's also free. In terms of your out-of-pocket cost, you called it a breakfast seminar or lunch and learn, so you certainly should feed them, but you don't need to go crazy on fancy catering. You don't need like white glove catering service. This isn't a wedding or bar mitzvah or sweet 16 or something like that. It's like a business casual kind of breakfast or lunch. So for breakfast, it's bagels and pastry, maybe some fruit salad and yogurt or coffee or something like that. If you really want to go all out, or just pick some of those. For lunch, it could be pizza, sandwiches, salad, deli salads, something like that. Again, this is like in the US for 20 people, $500 to $1,000 budget at the absolute most, compared to the cost of multiple team members of yours flying to an event and buying a booth and everything. And still not getting the 45 minutes that you want with 20 people. Like, self-hosted events are the way forward. You have the room. You have personas. Say the first week of the month, you focus on your primary buyer persona. The second week of the month, you have your monthly event with your secondary buyer persona. The third week of the month, you have your tertiary buyer persona. If you get really good at this and multiple teams can execute this simultaneously, well, there's probably quite a few times of the week where your conference room is sitting empty. Go for it. Record. There's always going to be more people that should have been there that weren't, and there's always going to be people that want to share the recording and the slides with their coworkers who weren't able to be there, and the recording gives you fantastic repurposing and leverage for getting really good mileage out of that evergreen content. So in terms of generating leads, it's really just a matter of educate and build trust, know, like, and trust, have a call to action, have an offer that feels directionally right for who's in the room, and without it feeling like it's a hard sell for anything. Because if you hard sell and you pitch, probably not coming back for part 2, part 3, part 4. This is about educating and building trust. You're training them to know that there's no better option on the planet to come to when it comes to this learning and development, this professional development experience. And they start bringing more and more of their coworkers. It gets to the point where when of the 20 seats in the room, 10 are from one company, they're like, hey, I think we're like half of the people. Why don't you just come in and deliver this in our space and come on our campus and deliver this to our whole IT department, our whole engineering department. We're doing an offsite next month on the third Thursday. You want to come in? Let me see if I can get you on the calendar for 45 minutes, and you can deliver this to our entire company, our entire organization, whatever is relevant for you. You're like, well, that would be awesome. These are the amazing things that happen when you get out of the vendor box and you're seen as a teacher, a consultant, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor, early and often. This isn't one and done. 25 to 30 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. The better job you can do is saturating the surface area early and often, the more likely it is that it's very, very obvious that you are the option, the best option that they should be considering when it comes to your category. So that's what I'd be thinking about for generating leads for self-hosted data center events. And that brings us to our final question for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, which is, how do we audit and refresh a data center go-to-market strategy? How do we audit and refresh a data center go-to-market strategy? I think one of the most important parts of that audit and refresh comes down to starting with the basics. A simple one-page representation of your ideal client profile, where your ideal clients are located geographically, how big or small their companies are, in terms of ideally in terms of headcount, but it could be revenue, it could be kilowatts, megawatts. Most likely you're going to normalize around headcount because that's how the prospecting tools for outbound and ads tend to work. And then what industries are a great fit, what industries are a terrible fit for your inclusions and exclusions that drive your outbound, that drive your ad strategy, that drive your lead generation forms, your segmentation strategy. That's your ideal client profile. Then I would have a date on there. I would have an expire date where someone has to go back and refresh and make sure that that's still current. And then from the ideal client profile, I'd look at the strategy that you're using for account-based marketing, account-based selling, account-based experience, ABM, ABS, ABX, whatever you want to call it, and look at how recent that data is, how you're enriching that and keeping that current. Very likely that over time, a number of accounts, number of companies that are on there go through various forms of M&A and rebranding, and some grow, a lot grow, some shrink, but yeah, there's got to be a way to keep that current. And then your buyer personas, how you're segmenting your leads, which for sure is highly relevant to your outbound strategy. It's highly relevant to your ads. It has extreme importance in how you organize your website and your homepage and your navigation, what you do with your email marketing strategy. So that's at the company, the account level, as well as the individual level. Then I want to look at how our teams are organized. And in particular, what's being done to drive better alignment across marketing, sales, account management, product, channel partnerships, and the executive sponsor. It's probably one of the biggest plays that I see, biggest opportunities that I see for improvement across the data center industry is getting a lot more of everyone in those core roles working together as a team, as opposed to fighting for budget, fighting for credit, and being all siloed because you're measured on different metrics. The reality is the world we live in now, the self-driven buyer's journey really depends very, very heavily on unprecedented levels of alignment and collaboration across your internal team members. If there's internal friction, that's going to result in external friction. And that external friction is going to end up having a lousy prospect experience, a lousy customer experience, CX. It's going to affect your net promoter score. It's going to be a financial drag on your company. So these culture issues, these trust issues, you can't expect your employees to get their prospects and customers to trust them if they don't trust each other. So this isn't like a kumbaya sales kickoff, walking over hot coals kind of exercise. This is very, very real. And because of that, these are often decisions for a small to medium-sized company, initiatives for a small to medium-sized company where your internal champion needs to be your CEO. Once you get to the point that you're 500 plus employees, 1,000 plus employees, your internal champion probably as a chief commercial or chief revenue officer or a division VP or something like that. But yeah, a small to medium-sized company, this is important enough. These cultural issues are important enough that it needs to start at the CEO. So, and then like, what are the goals? What are the resources? Do you have a good process documented with good onboarding, or you have a really good handle on ramp time? Are you past the point where you're way past having product market fit and go to market fit and channel partner market fit? Or is your company relatively new or moving into new segments where the clock starts over again on product market fit and go to market fit and channel partner market fit, because you don't know what you don't know as you move into new product lines and new geographic markets and perhaps new size segments? Selling to mid-market is very different than SMB, and selling to enterprise is way, way different than selling to SMB. So all of those are considerations for as you're auditing and refreshing. I think the number one place, the number one gap, the number one mistake that I see being made across the board on data center GTM is dramatically underestimating how profound buyer behaviors have changed. In other words, the self-driven journey where your prospects and clients are doing a ton of research on their own before you ever get to meet them is a really, really profound change. And it certainly was a factor 10 years ago, but today, not only are they looking things up on YouTube and watching podcasts and attending webinars and asking their peers on LinkedIn and reading reviews, they're doing all of that in addition to spending insane amounts of time about topics that are highly relevant to what you do. It's not even asking questions, they're having conversations with ChatGPT and Copilot and Perplexity and Claude and Gemini and Grok and whatever chat apps are coming next and AI Essentials. They're just having crazy amounts of really, really deep conversations. And as a result, you are literally in competition with all of these self-driven journeys, because if you're invisible and absent till the point where they're ready to speak with you, you've already lost or very close to losing. You're immediately treading water because someone else got in there early and often and already educated and built trust with those prospects, with that company, with multiple stakeholders in that company, and helped to shape the criteria that dramatically stacks the decks in that company's favor, who almost certainly is a direct or indirect competitor of your company. So when it comes to auditing, when it comes to refreshing, do your resources align with what we just took a few minutes to outline? Do they align with your revised ideal client profile? Do they align with the updated goals and challenges that surfaced in your prioritized buyer personas? How current is your target account list that you're using for your account-based marketing sales experience? How well aligned is your company team members with working together, or are they individual silos? Do people have individual KPIs and goals as opposed to shared goals that force the companies to basically be in competition with each other and provide a crappy internal experience that bleeds over into a crappy external experience? Those are all the considerations that I would be thinking about for auditing and refreshing the data center GTM. At the end of the day, what I've been talking about for a while now is to get you out of the vendor box, to get you out of being commoditized. It's incredibly important that you build your own media company that excels at providing amazingly helpful educational resources and educational events experiences for your most important core buyer personas. I know there's a temptation to think that you can spend your way and buy your way and bribe your way in through paid events and paid conferences and things like that to basically pay people to be your friend. But you're selling to highly technical, highly educated, highly skeptical, cynical IT professionals and engineers and other folks similar to that are more sales allergic than they've ever been. Early and often, by the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right context. They need to see you and your client-facing team members as the be-all end-all experts when it comes to anything and everything that's in your category. So that's what I'd be thinking about for auditing and refreshing data center go-to-market. Sure, there's marketing technology and sales technology and CRMs and dashboards and everything that from a tactical perspective become hyper relevant. But I don't think for most companies, that's where it's falling apart. It's falling apart much earlier on alignment issues and on strategy issues, and frankly, being completely tone deaf for the shifts that have happened in buyer behavior among your core buyer personas. So many companies in the data center industry are selling as if we're still living in 10 years ago, as if there weren't these profound shifts in buyer behavior over the last 5 years or so, but they're only accelerating. ChatGPT and tools like that are just as addictive as people's addiction with spending time on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube. At the end of the day, all of these platforms are about improving their session time. The more minutes you spend, the more hours you spend, the stickier you are. And at some point, there's going to be all different kinds of monetization strategies. But right now, what's most important to understand is your entire go-to-market team is in direct competition for attention, not just with your competitors and indirect competitors, your non-business model competitors, which historically has meant like channel partner programs, media companies, conferences. But you know what else is a non-business model competitor for nearly everyone in the data center ecosystem? The LLM apps. They're creating amazingly helpful educational experiences that are pretty tough to hold a candle to. But if you don't think in terms of what you can do to provide next level value, you're going to get self-serviced into oblivion. And this is where you start to see companies shedding payroll to go to channel partnerships, shedding payroll to go to marketplaces. I want you to stay in the game. But in order for you to stay in the game, in order for your team to stay in the game, in order for your company to remain competitive, the new competitive battleground is educating and building trust through professional development and learning and development. And this changes the nature of who you're hiring and changes the nature of how you invest in upskilling. But most of all, these are massive culture changes that some companies are figuring out, and they're using this as a massive competitive weapon. Is your company living in the present, preparing for the future, or is it living in the past? Those are all the things I'd be thinking about when it comes to auditing and refreshing a data center go-to-market. That's our final question we'll be addressing in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. If you got good value from this week's show, be sure to hit the like button, help spread the word. And if you're listening on a platform that allows it, please take a moment to review and rate us as well. We'd be super appreciative. If you have an idea for a topic or a question or a challenge that you think we should address in an upcoming show, be sure to leave that in the comments on whatever platform that you're watching on, and we'll add that to the consideration queue for topics for upcoming episodes. If you want to make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events and resources just like this, be sure to subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that comes to your email inbox on Sundays. You can subscribe for free on our website at www.dcsmi.com. I'm Joshua Feinberg, Feinberg, founder of the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. If you and I are not currently connected on LinkedIn, you'd like to be sure to reference in the invitation note that you're a fan of Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, and I'd be happy to be connected with you on LinkedIn. And by the way, if we are already connected on LinkedIn, I'm always looking for great guests to interview on upcoming episodes of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, so feel free to reach out as well if you know someone that should be on our radar screen to potentially interview for an upcoming episode. We're so glad that you joined us for this week's installment of Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. We wish you tremendous success in growing your individual impact, your team's impact, and your company's impact throughout the data center, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure industry. Have a great rest of your week. Take care now.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.